As I stood waiting for the playful water to come tickle my feet, the river curved away into darkness. The sun would soon be replaced by the moon and relight the deserted beach. Another baby whimpered in the cabins across the waterhole, and the woken-up parents crawled through their blackened cabins, scrambling to quiet down their baby. As I waited to capture the moon's glow in my eyes, I inhaled the unforgettable smell of camp. It's the most familiar, comforting scent I've ever had the pleasure of enjoying. The moon lights up the sky, and I take a fast glimpse before running up to sandy rocks dried with water from the day's crowded swimmers. I barely need the flashlight to lead me back to comforting cabin number 32, because as the moon becomes dimmer, I use the scraps of light from the leftover stars to guide me home. I hop into the chilled sleeping bag with berries and recently dead leaves tucked into my mattress. As I hopped into my sleeping bag, still semi-wet, I tried to remember every moment a few hours before. All the staff ran to one table and began banging on it so that everyone in camp could hear the chattering silverware dancing. By the time I was only 10 seconds into pounding on the table, we were running outside into the stinging cold and passing the teasing heaters. One by one, we jumped into the still, ice-cold water, nobody caring about the black sky or riverbed. I palmed my head above the water, and the smile I was wearing felt like it could never come off. Nick, a close staff member, had leaned over to me and said, "Remember this, because when I was your age, being able to have this kind of amazing memory is rare. So hold on to it and be in the moment, because this is what camp is all about." That was the last time I touched the perfect ice-cold water that was once surrounded by the most essential parts of my summer. I left my home one day and never returned. Berkeley Tuolumne Camp burned down August 23, 2013 in the rim fire in Yosemite. Since I was 4, it had been my second home, a place that made those few days of the year worth remembering. From the dogs welcoming me with a howl to the unforgettable life friends I made at camp. I saw everyone the next year and nothing has changed, because that is what camp can do to people. It can bind people together with their love of camp. This summer, I got to be a CIT. Working for camp felt like you were a part of giving away happiness. It changed the way I got to look at camp. I felt a part of something magical because it truly was. The day I left camp, I grabbed the warmth of my friends and we shook each other until our unseen smiles were bright red. Partly because of the sticky July heat, and partly because of our unshowered body heat mixed together. We pulled our bodies apart and looked at each other, not speaking, just knowing exactly what we were thinking about. I began to walk down the dusty steps to the bridge, looking right at arts and crafts, and left at the familiar crashing waterfall. I smiled at all the beauty I called home. Waving at strangers and smiling at happy campers I had waited on the night before, I looked back at Olivia and howled as if we were dogs. My grin stretched out across the river and was reflected back at me like a boomerang. In that moment, I knew I was a part of something great. As I hopped into the car, driving away from the dirt paths and onto the highway, I said, "Goodbye, Tuolumne, see you next year," just as I had last year and every year since I was 4. I didn't realize that was the last time I would say goodbye to the place that made me most happy. I felt a tear drip down my face as I recollected the most amazing memories I had made those past 2 weeks. A week had passed. I would see friends like Jack and Nick walking in the halls of Drake, and we would smile and ask how we were doing. Even though we couldn't explain, we just nodded and understood perfectly the unbearable thoughts that were racing through our minds. We all went to the memorial, and I picked up a kid that I had spent time with over the summer. And we sang the camp song together, not knowing anything about each other, but knowing every chord of the song and every chord it pulled on our hearts. We smiled at each other. He rested his head on my shoulder, and as we looked up to the people next to us, we were in a room full of people we didn't know well, but knew their favorite place on earth, and they knew ours. There's no place like Camp Tuolumne.